What is up, guys? We're back. It's Higher Exchanges. I'm Jesse Redmond, Head of Investor Relations and Business Development at Leaf Brands. I'm here once again with the smartest cannabis investor I know. He is the humble Morgan Paxia. Morgan, what's going on, man?
Good to be on here for this show today. This is, I think, our last of the year, maybe. It's pretty crazy. Don't worry, Bills fans. My Bills flag is on the flagpole and out front. So it's not that the Bills flag is down anymore. It's just in its proper place now that we got a flag holder for it. So,
you flying it outside on the deck, or where could I find this in the greater San Diego area?
Yeah, out front, proud. Gotta keep on the momentum here we got, which is great.
You Buffalonians are proud people, Morgan. For like not a glamorous city. If you're from Buffalo, people like to tell you they're from Buffalo.
Well, I still have my 716 phone number, which is, I know phone numbers don't matter anymore, but it's a point of pride.
How many phone numbers do you think you know by heart right now?
2.
Yeah, I think I have like 2 or 3 as well. But do you remember being younger and you knew everybody's phone number?
Yep.
Yeah.
I know my wife's and I know Emily's, I think. Yes, I still know Emily's, yeah.
Who do you guys have this weekend?
Patriots.
Ooh.
Yeah, we're going to finally put them to the test of their stellar record they have this year.
Well, Morgan, I feel like I'm pretty good. I've been with stacking Thanksgiving and MJBiz. Like, I'm not a real debaucherous person in general, but I'm a huge routine person. Like, I eat at the similar time every day, go to bed at a similar time every day. Not a huge alcohol guy, blah, blah, blah. No one wants to hear about it. But going through Thanksgiving and, we tend to all, let our belt out, get a little loose around Thanksgiving. And then right after that, you head over to MJBiz where, you're having a couple more drinks, you're eating a bunch of bad food, you're not sleeping as well. So I feel like it takes me, 4 or 5 days after that 2-week stretch to feel like I'm back to a bit of my normal self.
Yes. I haven't heard this year of, I know we're going to get into Vegas here in a second, but the last several years, really from COVID, and then I know we had a year off, but then a couple of years after that, people came back so sick. Yeah. And I haven't heard that this year, which is nice, obviously.
No, I heard people returned healthy, and I felt like people returned. I feel like last year when you did conferences, it felt a bit more like a funeral type vibe where people were pretty down. And I don't know if it's just fatigue or people getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, but I feel like MJBiz was smaller, but I feel like the people that were there wanted to be there. And I didn't have a ton of depressing conversations. Like, there's the political stuff we could all, hum and haw over. We're frustrated with that, but it felt, I don't know, for lack of a better term, a bit more solution oriented, and it wasn't particularly, I didn't find it. You can tell me what you think, Morgan. I didn't find it to be a particularly dreary event. I was kind of surprised by it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was really easy to get, because people, I feel like, at least some conversations I was having, I feel like it was a bit of a vent, a bit of a therapy session, like you and I do, where we, we'll just commiserate on things. I feel like there was some of that, but I agree. I think finally the sentiment seems to be changing where people are saying like, we've got to do something. Like something with our businesses, we've got to be thinking more strategic. Something else needs to happen. The status quo is, I'd say, people we were trying to focus on conversations with are the ones that are focused on change and making something happen. And, instead of just kind of head in the sand anymore. I feel like, to your point, last year was, I didn't even go last year, but from what I remember hearing about it was still a lot more kind of head in the sand kind of mentality.
Yeah, and we had a lot of conversations, just business to business conversations, whether it's a big MSO, a regional player, another California operator, where it's just real solution oriented, where let's just sit down, here's our business, let's share about what we're doing. Oh, great, we're in New York, you're in New York, or you're looking at California, here's what we found in California. And just the real openness. I don't know, maybe it's just the meetings that I had, but I felt like there's a good openness just to like learning about each other, sharing, and realizing we're all in different degrees of a tough spot together in an industry that's been challenging for a long time. And I like the vibe of people trying to be friendly. And, we're competitors in some ways, but we're allies in others. And I feel like there's been a bit of a shift, at least in my universe, of let's try to figure out how do we make this work together. Let's share ideas. We can't do anything. Cool. Great to meet you. But usually you can find a thing or two in common. Like, oh, why don't we talk about wholesale? Why don't we talk about the brand thing? Why don't we talk about, selling some flour, whatever you can do together.
Yeah, and I think, we're speaking in generalization. So there certainly are, a cohort of folks that still are of the mindset of zero sum. I must win at your loss, and that's it. Instead of, I'd say a much broader and growing cohort of, okay, this is tough. What can we do to be smarter and more efficient and make it through this?
Yeah,
and that's huge. I think that's huge for a couple reasons. Obviously, from the business side, but also from the policy side. One of the big challenges we continue to be dealing with is we suck at DC.
Yes.
No, I don't think anyone argues about that. Our representation in DC is fragmented. It's not enough, and our voices are of not of one, singular focus, and it's been to our detriment. So I think, people realizing, we're competitive in business, but we need to find ways that if we can work together, great. But also focus on the bigger mission of we've got a lot of work to do to not only clean up the state regulatory program, but, make federal change happen.
Yeah. And you were there for a super short amount of time. I saw you briefly at your mixer that you did, your CEO mixer, which was Tuesday night. And I'm like, oh, Morgan's talking to someone. I'll give him a quick hello and I'll chat with them in a few minutes. And next thing I knew, I saw you grabbing your backpack and aggressively walking out the door.
Yeah, I was pretty quick with my time in Vegas. I was pretty singularly focused on one situation we've been working on for a bit now, and so I had stacked up meetings all around just that mixer, and then the next morning, and before I had it out. So it was good to be there. Good to see you for a second. At least get to shake hands. But yeah, it was quick. I thought that mixer was great. I mean, I'll give Patrick from Poseidon a lot of credit for making that all really happen. I just get to be a happy participant. But it seems like it's he's really done a good job with getting these events going within these bigger events, where trying to really focus on getting the key people in the room so that there can be good conversations. Seem like people are having a good time too, which is very important. It's Vegas, people are coming in from all over, so have some fun and catch up with people you want to talk to.
It felt like this one was maybe bigger than ever. Did you sense that as well?
Yeah, I think it was like maybe 300 people. It was huge. So, and for anyone that reached out to me like within an hour before the event asking how to get in, sorry I wasn't able to accommodate. I mean, so, but yeah, it seemed like that was a very well attended event, and I didn't make it to the show floor as a result. Did you make it on the floor?
Nah.
Okay.
No, man. I had a longer week, so I wasn't even planning on going out there. And then our CEO Micah hit me up, and he's like, "I need to go out there and check out a project on Tuesday. It's a couple hours outside of Vegas. Do you want to come check on that with me? And then we'll see if we can do a few meetings." And so that was maybe like midweek, the week before. So I grabbed hotels were brutal, like to stay at some nice place was better part of $1,000, and so I ended up at some Hilton by the convention center, which is fine by me. wasn't a big deal. But yeah, I got in Monday night, Morgan. I got back to the room a little bit late, not because I was out. I worked Monday, then I flew in Monday night, and Mike had already gone out to dinner, so it's too late to do something with him. So I pulled up the DoorDash menu, Morgan, and the first thing staring at me was chicken. I'm like, okay, I don't need to do something fancy here. I'll order a chicken sandwich. I'll watch the rest of the Monday Night Football game, and I'm going to go to sleep. Are you a spicy guy, Morgan? Do you enjoy spicy food at all?
I do like spicy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I've evolved into that. When I was a young man, mild was all I could handle. But as I've gotten older, like something's died, like you talk about being dead inside, my mouth is kind of dead inside now. And I can handle really hot things. So if I go to, what I thought were hot things. So if I go to a Mexican restaurant in California, I can get the hottest salsa and I don't really feel it. And I kind of take a little bit of perverse pride in this. And I've seen that hot chip challenge. You familiar with that one? Yeah. And I watch that show Hot Ones, and I see people dying from really hot things.
Yep.
And I've been kind of curious, like, have I evolved to the point where I could eat that chip? Or have I evolved to the point where I could go on Hot Ones and I could eat those, super hot wings? So as it goes back to Vegas, DoorDash pops up. Top chicken place was staring right at me. It's called Angry Chicks, CHICKZ, I think. Click on it, click down to sandwiches. They've got a whole range of options there, Morgan, starting with a nothing to a mild to a medium. The medium, they said, our medium's really hot. This is where most people want to land. Goes to hot, twice as hot, and at the very end is angry. So I say, well, I want to make sure I have something I can actually eat here. So let me get the hot, and that'll at least ensure I have dinner that I can consume. But I'm really curious about the angry. And so I added one angry side tender. So I get the hot chicken sandwich. I eat that. My mouth is on fire. Like the way you'd want. This stuff was hot. Like it was a lot hotter than I expected, but hot to the point where I could have a sip of water, totally cool, and be like, oh, great. That was a hot sandwich. Well done, guys. So I eat the hot one, and the angry tender is still staring at me. And it looks a little bit different. You can tell it has some ghost pepper or something on it. So I take the tiniest nibble, Morgan, like a quarter nibble of this thing. And I'm dying. Like this thing is so fucking hot. And so I sit with it for like a minute, and I'm like, well, you should at least see if you could have a proper bite of this thing. So I take the tender and I eat a whole bite of it. And I immediately knew I had made a mistake. Like it was so hot, Morgan, that I have AirPods in, and I go and lay down in the bed, and I can't even have anything playing in my ears. I'm in such distress. I'm pouring sweat. I'm actually drooling. Like I'm drooling on the bed. I've got a towel because I need to keep the drool from coming out of my mouth, because my mouth is just trying to cool itself somehow. So it's just producing rampant drool. Can't talk. Can't listen to anything. I think I was in the fetal position for a good 20, 25 minutes. And then I peeked my head up from the covers, and there's a glass of water. Made another mistake, and I took the water and I swished it all around my mouth, and which just moves the spices to every single part of your mouth. Yes. So now my entire mouth, rather than just my tongue, my whole mouth is just like screaming. So I realized this isn't going to last forever. I don't have any milk or anything to soothe it. And so I just got it out. Realistically, within about an hour, I was able to hold a conversation again, go to bed, wake up the next morning. And I watched a show on Netflix. It's called like Pepperheads or something, about these guys that eat the peppers at the conferences. I've been to too many conferences, at the contests. But they say the worst part isn't eating it. The worst part is the way your digestive tract feels from having like 30, flaming hot peppers in it. Well, I'm nowhere in that kind of shape. But dude, I wake up, and from like my throat down to my stomach is just completely like a ball of fire.
Oh my gosh.
And so I'm like, well, I'm gonna have to go to the bathroom sometime today. So why don't I get this out of the way? Yeah, that wasn't good. But it felt better after getting some of the chicken out of my system. So I'm like, okay, I can handle this now. I'm gonna go have a day. And I go meet Micah at his hotel, get in the car. We're about an hour away in the desert, and I had just pounded this large Starbucks coffee, or venti, as Starbucks would say. And I'm like, oh man, the chicken is still angry. And so just fire again, all the way to my throat, down to my stomach. And we're in the middle of the desert, where like, this is where they're burying the bodies of the mafia. It was like one of those sorts of scenes. There's no rest stop. There's no truck stop. There's no nothing. It's so bad, Morgan, that I'm gonna have to tell Micah I ate this chicken sandwich. I got to pull over to evacuate the rest of the chicken sandwich. I start like sweating in the car, and I start thinking like, well, I'm gonna have to wipe eventually here. I'm gonna start getting graphic here, guys. But am I gonna have to take my t-shirt off and sacrifice this? What socks am I wearing? Like I've got a problem on my hands.
Wow.
So I decide I'm just gonna gut it out. I see a town that's 17 miles away, which is about 15 minutes at the speed we're going. And super long story, a bit shorter, ended up making it and to some truck stop in the middle of nowhere. Thankfully had a bathroom, got the rest of the chicken out of my system, and for the rest of the trip I was fine. But that was my encounter, Morgan, with an angry chicken sandwich, or angry chicken tender.
I love that you drank a large coffee. That's like pouring gasoline on embers.
I know,
You
just
know, you're
well, hubris, whatever the word is for it. Yeah,
yeah.
I thought it was I thought it was in the clear, but yeah,
Oh,
no such luck.
man, I
S-
tell you, you're in a rough place when you are going through the options of what article of clothing can I sacrifice.
Yeah. Yeah, and
That's
you just get that
it.
desperate and you just get that desperate feeling where you're like, I'm not gonna have an accident in the car, especially with our CEO. Mike was a super chill guy, but like still, shitting your pants in the car with your CEO isn't super awesome. And then you're thinking, like, even if I pulled over, I'll do anything just to make this go away. I'll do anything just to make this go away. And yeah, what did yeah, Guap's telling us in the comments here. The chicken is still angry. Says it's a great way to bond with the boss. Yeah, that's just the situation that I'm looking for, Guap. So anyway, if you go to Vegas, that's my PSA. I think Dave's is another chicken chain. I haven't tried Dave's, but I think they have a ridiculously hot one too. And I realized when I looked it up before the show, and it says you're supposed to sign a waiver to have the angry chicken, and I was not given the waiver, nor did I sign it.
It was amongst the all of the disclaimers in DoorDash that you don't know about.
Yeah, exactly. So that was my Monday night was hot chicken sandwich. Tuesday, we went out and checked out this project in Nevada, which I won't go into great detail on. And yeah, then we rolled over. We're later to your event than I would have liked. I heard you had a panel there. And yeah, we missed that. I rolled in too late to your event because we were on this long day trip. So that was great. And then we went to a really great dinner that night. Shout out to Kellen and the guys from Dutchy. Have you been to Carbone before in Vegas or New York?
I don't think so.
Yeah, like old school Italian place. So they put on a fantastic dinner there. Wednesday, got to see our friend Aaron Miles from Verano. Got to hang out with him a bit in the morning. Had lunch with Ron and the guys from Jetty. Shout out to
Nice.
Ron from his recent Higher Exchanges appearance. So it was good to catch up with him event at
Yep.
that. Attach had a great event. I'm sure some of our listeners were out at that one at the Las Vegas Country Club. They did a nice thing out there. Shad and Anthony from the Dales Report invited us out there. So hung out with those guys a bit. Those are fun guys to have a couple of beers with. Then what did I do? Thursday. Yeah, Thursday morning, couple meetings. Our Higher Exchanges friend Seth Yakatan, former guest, they had a coffee and bagels thing that morning. So went up to some suite in the Vidar or something like that. And then yeah, I was out of there kind of midday on Friday. So yeah, never went to the conference center, mainly just Ubered around and did a bunch of in-person meetings. But kind of a classic experience for me, aside from the chicken sandwich, like setting that part aside, just in terms of conferences, another classic time where it's like I resist and say I'm not going to go. I don't know what the value is. And then, we've had a few conversations there that have led to follow-ups and new business opportunities, and ended up being super glad I went despite my initial resistance to going.
Nice. Yeah, Patrick did go to the floor. He sent us a video at one point, and I heard from others that did go on the floor that certainly a lot smaller than it's been. No surprise. Not shelf space, booth space
Yeah.
at the convention center it's a very hard thing to justify for a lot of companies. Some of our portfolio companies obviously were there. They've reported back so far that they've similar to you. People are looking for opportunities in action, and so which is great. That you can actually have some meaningful conversations and subsequent follow-ups that can lead to some more opportunities. So, that I think is great. It's pretty tough for companies to go and spend a bunch of money and not get any ROI from it, right? So
Yeah.
it's good to hear that kind of stuff is happening. The landscape of even service providers is narrowing as well. So I think it's just like operators, survive is the first step to win. And so I think those that are surviving through this are, seeing the benefit of that. I mean, it's not easy, but that's what the environment calls for. So, but it sounds like you had a good overall jam-packed. I do, and I've had this conversation as well with people, is I do kind of wonder the benefit though of Vegas. I mean, it's really brutal doing it when you have an Amazon event going on. To your point, then everything's jacked up for pricing, and Ubers are expensive. Everything's expensive, and you're just spend so much time running around. The early days we used to do it at the Rio. Not saying that is an all-star hotel, but at least it was all in one place, and it's one thing I used to enjoy about Benzinga,
Yeah.
which is now Ignited, but doing like the Miami event that was so great at the Fontainebleau or like in Chicago, because it's much more condensed. So it's so easy to go see people
Yep.
and take multiple meetings, and you don't lose a lot of time running around.
Yeah, you could be in one hotel, finish a meeting at 10 o'clock, and you need to give yourself 45 minutes to really get to the next meeting because it's 10 minutes to leave the hotel. It's 10 minutes waiting for the Uber. It's 10 minutes in the Uber, and it's 10 minutes going from the Uber, to the next meeting spot. So yeah, I find it really inefficient rather. And I love the Chicago event for the Florida was great too, but the Chicago one comes to mind where you're at the Marriott for the Benzinga now. Ignite it. Everybody's you can either have a private meeting room and see them there, or you can just grab coffee. And if you go to one mixer, most people are going to be there. Whereas feel like it's divide and conquer at MJBiz, where you could be at the Dutchy event, you could be at the Jeter event, you could be at the other events, and you may or may not see everyone. Where I feel like at the Ignitic stuff is more centralized and maybe a bit more investor focused as well, where not that it's a bad thing, especially for us because we work with a lot of brands, but I feel like the MJ Biz is less investor, more kind of real industry brands, products, all that sort of stuff.
Right. I liked like Work, or the HR payroll company that I've been a part of for a long time now. And so Work did I think in conjunction with Flower Hire, they did a specific event tailored around like HR compliance. And they had great turnout, and they had a lot of people that were, a lot of companies out there don't know shit about what they should be doing in HR and compliance kind of stuff. And so having a targeted kind of theme around that, then you pull in the people that do care about that. And I do wonder about these events of like, should they be more focused on like these tailored things instead of these like kind of catch-all sessions? Because no one cares, right? I mean, for the most part, anyone that's still in this industry doesn't need to go see like a general panel discussion about whatever, right? They're more solution focused. And I know that's like a harder thing to wrangle of like, especially if you're the event organizer, like who do you pick? Like they're not supposed to be in the business of picking the winners and losers of who should be represented in this thing. So it's great when the companies themselves orchestrate that. And then, reach out to their base about what they're doing. But I thought that was an impactful way to get more benefit out of the event with the people attending. So
Yeah.
So hopefully we see more of that. Because I do think companies need help in various ways, and so finding if there's targeted events that can help them at least get more educated about what's out there makes sense.
How did your panels work? I missed them. I talked to a few people that were on them, but did that work out well for you guys?
Well, we just did the one. Well, Patrick was on actual event.
Yeah,
MJBiz
I meant at the mixer.
At the mixer. I mean, I thought it was a fun topic to have, and it was an interesting panel. And there was a pretty good amount of people that sat down and listened. There was definitely a lot of people that stayed back and were enjoying the outdoor space and the back of the bar area. So it's tough when it's at an eve. I give Patrick credit for trying it to see how it would go. I think there's some good content that he'll be republishing from that. For those that were not able to hear us in the back, I tried to speak very loudly. So I was trying to, it was basically like the idea of where do we see this industry in 10 years? And I think that's a really good idea of like, not just the next quarter, but really trying to think on a long-term horizon and, hearing from different people. So we had Scott Grossman from Turning Point. We had Aaron Miles from Verona. We had Gretchen from what's her actual policy group called? But so so it was really interesting, in all of our different perspectives of what we got to do.
Yeah. MJ Biz always kind of reminds me too that another year's over, which is shocking. It's hard to believe that another year passed. But what do you think, Morgan? Kind of looking back at this last year. Today we're going to reflect a little bit about what happened in the last year, and then also look a little bit ahead to 2026. But one thing I think you're great about is always trying to learn from experiences. You like to learn from some of the best out there, like, the Warren Buffetts, the Charlie Munkers of the world. But you also, I think, are good at trying to learn from your experiences. And I think that's, super important right now at this, point we're in the cannabis industry. Like, we've had this long, miserable period, and hopefully, we get out to the other side here, and we, have a more positive, healthy period ahead of us. But as we go into that healthier period, if and when that does happen, hopefully a when, not an if, I think it's important to take with it from, like, what did you learn from the last from the last year? And so let's start off, looking back at the last 11 months or so. Any big surprises? Anything that happened in 2025 that wasn't really on your bingo card?
Yeah, so I'm gonna stay away from the obvious, for to keep it interesting, because I originally was going to talk about, the hemp ban. I think that was a big surprise, but or Trump talking about publicly about rescheduling in this summer. Obviously, those were two big surprises. But I think what was two that stood out from the state level, um, and the learnings will come from it in a moment. But was Michigan raising taxes,
Hmm.
completely dumb, short-sighted, typical political, bad decision making in a market that was already on its heels. That's a serious punch in the gut. So juxtaposed to California, which did actually have its automatic tax increase, which was able to get retracted. San Francisco tried to do a tax increase that has now been put on the shelf for 10 years. Hirsch was there, did a great recap of that. Um, and the third thing with California amongst these two was what just came out. I think that was today. Was Elliott from Catalyst? Has been battling with California, and the court basically ruled in his favor that the governor and the DCC, our regulatory body of California, has failed to do its job in in allowing for companies to either skirt or illicit activity to be as rampant as it is. And the learnings from that are, I know groups here in California that have been very politically active in trying to clean it up, and you're seeing some of their effort is actually bearing fruit. And I say that because the learning is, I don't know if that same effort went in Michigan. I don't know what they were doing, if they understood that if they didn't get in there and work like crazy, that tax increase wouldn't happen. Now, it may have taken California a couple laps of pain before, those that are surviving are like, we've got to fix this, for them to really get involved and be a part of change to try to stabilize and help the industry get in a better place. But that was really good to see. I know no people don't, there's a lot of people that just kind of write off California, which I think is very short-sighted. It's a huge market. It's very hard, but there are things happening here, and the state, interestingly too, is like everyone, always loves to hate on California, but the economy here is, we go through the cycle first. We went through a slowdown first. Things are starting to stabilize. San Francisco is getting stronger and stronger. Tourism's coming back. AI money's going. Like, the city's getting more energized. It's going to keep proliferating through California. So we already went through this kind of like low, and we're starting to ramp back up. So that should help for jobs and for spending and legal cannabis. You know what I mean? Like, all these things that have been headwinds for a while are starting to shift in favor, in addition to good policy work from those that are in the legal space and care about the legal space. So that was a key, key learnings for me, is like, it still works. So, to be politically engaged, and there's still so much work in these states to even strengthen these state programs. And so I think that was, yeah. And so that, I know they're tied, but those were two big surprises for me at the state level. You could probably almost add in Ohio what's coming out right now with what's happening with their legal market. I don't know if you've been following that, but how they're trying to basically harmonize hemp, intoxicating hemp, into their legal cannabis. And one thing that I've talked about before, but it was interesting to come back up in this evolution of the legal market in Ohio, is no more public consumption. You can't be smoking, you can't be vaping at bars. and things like that, it can be a misdemeanor. And I think that is very important because, as Hirsch has educated us on, is Ohio is a swing state. And one thing that I do think is important is I strongly believe POTUS is not a fan of public consumption. And so for them to kind of be putting a signal around that might be a positive thing as well, because, I thought it was, not everyone likes the smell of weed. I do, you do, but not
Yeah.
everybody. So it's like, I think there's a level of respect in that kind of process. So anyways, how about you?
Yeah, let me just pause for a second. I think that California conversation is particularly interesting, and I've been thinking about it from a little bit different perspective, and been having a lot of conversations. Talked with Aaron, had a good conversation. Aaron from Verano had a good conversation with Craig Fox, who I think is a bright, big picture thinker from UBET Advisory, and just talked about capex decisions. And I think that we painted California with a negative brush for a long time because it's a challenging market. Taxes are absolutely too high. We need more dispensaries. It's a place that has a lot of challenges. But if you can take a business, Morgan, and like take what we did with Leaf. And so we were, historically, our struggle with Leaf has been at the gross margin side. We grow revenue well, but just by doing the extraction component in California, we were about a 25% gross margin business. We ran pretty lean, but still converting to EBITDA and cash flow off of 25% gross margins is a pretty big challenge. So this year in California, we added the farm, called Salisbury Canyon Ranch. So now we're growing a good portion of the material at a much lower cost. We're growing for less than $10 a pound. We used to buy material for $20 to $40 a pound. So we've cut our input costs a ton, and we've taken California from, call it for round numbers, a 25% gross margin business to something more like a 50% plus gross margin business. And now it's a real functioning investable thing. And so we've spent the money in California. It turned it into something that's compelling and investable. We were cash flow positive last quarter. So that's cool. But the punchline to me, Morgan, is that if you can make California work, so you're not dying, you have a call option that's slowly appreciating in value, not decaying like they normally would. And the call option is on the federal reform component. So again, you take back to what we're doing, where we have, one of the largest cultivation permits in the world. We have one of the biggest extraction facilities in the world, and that serves California well. But we can do more than just California with, the foundation that we have in place. So if you're looking at a Leaf, a Glass House, a lot of other California businesses, if they can make it work today, and you also have the call option that over time, there are not many states, in my opinion, over the long term, let's call it long term, 10 years or more, they're going to be where assets are going to appreciate in value. So if you're an MSO in 12 states with 2 million square feet of indoor, I think over a long enough time horizon, 5 or 10 years, interstate commerce, 75% of that indoor footprint goes away and the rest comes from California. Dispensaries, over a long enough time frame, I think, that world changes, right? That becomes Amazon, that becomes Circle K, that becomes Walmart, whatever it is. We can talk about, the time frame for that. So I say that all to reinforce the point that California is difficult, but is it resonating at all, Morgan, this idea that if you can make California work as, let's say, a 50% gross margin business that cash flows, investing more in California could make a ton of sense because you're investing in an asset that is potentially appreciating long term, and maybe at one point sharply when interstate commerce opens.
Yeah. You look at what's already happening is California is going to consolidate. It's already happening. It's consolidating down, and there's going to be just a few large groups, and that's going to be it. And you are certainly a part of that ecosystem. And I say that because you look at what Stizzy is doing. Just buying, winning the receivership bid on Gold Flora assets. They have a pretty formidable position in the state. They have a lot of stores.
That'd be like that. It was 14 more from that footprint. So was that 50 plus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just in California. And if you think about California, as you were mentioning earlier, there's still so many municipalities that have opted out. That's something the state needs to resolve. That's just absurd because anyway, but there, and say there's 500 legal stores, they have 10%, but of the 500, how many of those are viable, or how many of those are companies you want to do business with? And And then, so they're the biggest from number of stores. And then there's going to be like, 4 or 5 other players that are going to have most of the retail in the state. And so I agree with you that, but it's needed, right? I mean, for you guys to really be efficient, it's probably so much easier if you call up 5 companies and you can secure an offtake on everything you make, right?
Mhm.
Instead of calling up 500 different companies and hoping that some will pay you, And
Yeah.
so, but and I think this is where a lot of the large operators that have just turned a blind eye is like, if you can't figure out the knife fight of California, where you've got illicit market, you've got double dippers, you've got all this stuff going on, all this crazy stuff. If you can find a way to make it through all that, to your point, with margins and cash flow, you're doing something that's resonating with the customer.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, is how you're going to succeed. Because I don't think price compression is going to stop anywhere in this country. I don't think we're seeing the end of it. Maybe it slows, but I don't think it's over by any means. And so that means it's just going to become harder and harder. Like, you got to have really good, got to be doing good stuff that keeps the customer coming back in the store, or keep, for you, like, more on the B2B side, having that, really strong relationship that they can depend on you. They know you're going to produce what you say you're going to produce, and they'll keep coming back and buying from you over and over again. So, yeah, California, this is definitely the market to cut your teeth in, and you do it here. And I feel like for a while people stopped saying that when things were getting really pretty messy, but I feel like it's starting, the storm clouds are parting as it's getting to a more, I'd say, streamlined landscape.
Mhm.
What do you say? What do you think about that? Is that reasonable, or do you think
Yeah, I
I'm
think
jumping the shark a little?
no, I think you're right, but I think there's some survivorship bias in there, right? Because even at MJBiz, if we're meeting with California operators, those are the people that are surviving, still out there swinging and, having a public presence and a budget for conferences and all that stuff. And so missing in that are all the people that have drowned along the way. And, we all have, friends that have, metaphorically drowned along the way. So definitely, especially for like the legacy guys, I always feel bad about that. Our lab is in Mendocino County, right next to Humboldt, and the decimation of the small farmer and everything it's taken to get here, I think is, wrong and largely unnecessary. So, but I think the conversations we're left having today are with the survivors, and there's still some of the survivors are scrambling to make it. But I feel like maybe we don't hear the negatives quite as much, because maybe it's improving a bit on the margin, but maybe it's getting better on the margin too, because some of those people have had to leave, and the survivors have picked up some of that business maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely sad about the lost culture and
Yeah.
experience that we did have in Northern California. I'm not, don't mean to, speak rosy about that, because that is really unfortunate. There was some amazing craft quality that was coming out of there from people that really cared about what they were doing, that just couldn't survive in this structure. But again, I blame the state for that, because there should have been, if there was an ample playing field of legal municipalities, and strong enforcement of those that were diverting to, encourage legal participation, I think it would look very different in California. But that's hindsight bias for sure.
Yeah.
And so, should the state continue to progress and expanding access, maybe it can bring some more of that culture back, some of that craft culture. You know, part of that long-term vision I see is, to your point, I think, the idea of having cultivation in every single state is nonsensical. It's not good capital allocation, and it's still, our industry is massively fragmented as a result. And so a transition to what that looks like longer term means fewer and much larger production. And not to I'm not trying to diminish anybody here, but like just trying to make a corollary to alcohol. You drive across the country, you see like 4 or 5 massive Budweiser plants, right? But you think of the countless amounts of micro breweries and cideries and distillers, kind of, that can pop up around the massive producers. And that's how I do think this industry will look, so that you can have a lot of like the manufactured products be consistent and stable and fit that niche, or that very large part of the market. And then you can have all these others that are sprinkled in, and they can certainly have their piece of the pie and doing things that are interesting and resonating with customers. And I think we'll get there, but I mean, we're just in the middle of that shakeup, and that's brutal in between, because we haven't solved that issue where we still have all this intrastate fragmentation without really any clarity around when that'll change or how that'll change.
Yeah, I think 80% of wine comes from California, and I've always thought of that as being kind of a fair analogy. Maybe a bit different because we don't grow wine indoors. And so, you're not going to have great Minnesota wine, whereas you theoretically could have, great Minnesota weed because you can go grow great stuff indoor. But I think that's probably how I see it looking, is about 80% of things, come out of California on the flower side. And then you have local craft stuff, which can still be fantastic. But, if you've got especially in the extract business, Morgan, if you don't have your costs down, it doesn't work. Like having an all indoor footprint and trying to do distillate out of it, that just makes zero sense, because having that, higher theoretically indoors isn't always better, but the reputation is having that higher quality, more expensive material to turn into distillate just doesn't pencil. And so I think all of that, and not all of it, 90 some percent plus comes from California, especially in the concentrate market, where having your cogs down is so critical. And then I think you have kind of like you have the little wineries around the country, especially in some of the warmer regions. I think you have your craft grows, and I don't know the number, but let's say Verano has 2 million square feet of indoor. Maybe that goes down to 500,000, or I'm not picking on Verano. It could be Curaleaf, or whatever it is, over the longer term.
Yeah. Well,
but
what were some surprises for you, though?
What's that?
What were some
My surprises? Yeah, so I have mine aren't nearly as clever as yours, Morgan. But I'll just give my honest surprises looking back. I'm surprised nothing happened federally, and pretty much nothing happened at the state level in terms of opening a new state. And I shouldn't be surprised by this, but I still am surprised by how stuck we feel. And I think back to maybe 16 months ago, something like that, the conversations we were having around, we thought Schedule 3, or the consensus view was there's optimism around Schedule 3 happening late that year. There was the Florida vote. We've been waiting on Pennsylvania forever. We have, Virginia out there. And there's so much potential. I guess I say it because there's so much potential in the industry, and there's so much demand for THC products. Like this whole mess that this industry feels like isn't because the end consumer doesn't want to feel cannabis effects. It's that we have the messiest, most screwed up system possible in terms of how they get those products. And then for the operators making them, we're paying twice the effective tax rate of other businesses. And we have to replicate the business model in each state we go to. And then the state lays on onerous taxes on top of it. So we have a broken system. And I feel like in some ways, I'm glad that's the problem. And you can tell me what you think, but I think that's better than having a demand problem. Sometimes it looks like we have a demand problem, right? Because you see the slow growth in the industry, but that isn't speaking to, are people still getting high? Do people still want to use it recreationally? People still want to use it medically? Are we finding more medical uses for it? People like my dad, the guy's freaking 80 years old. He's hitting a volcano to help his chronic pain problem. Then you have people like me and you who are just using it for recreational substance. And all around me, I see this wonderful use of cannabis, more and more uses, better products out there, more form factors, more ways to access it. But we put it in the structure where the states aren't turning on. The hemp thing was running wild. The states that are turned on do things like California does, where you have such onerous taxes. And depending where you are, it can be hard to find a dispensary. And then you lay on top of it that not only do we not have incentives, which is fine, we don't need incentives in our industry, but you have this opposite of an incentive, which is, twice the effective tax rate for a lot of these businesses. And I guess I'm surprised maybe because I see this juxtaposition between the potential the industry has and how slowly it's evolving. Like I feel like it wants to bust out. I feel like there's demand in Florida for adult use. I feel like there's demand in Pennsylvania for adult use. I feel like, in Virginia, we can do so much better than the hemp, and we can flip that to adult use, and more people can have clean tested products, more age gating out there, all that sort of stuff. but we continue to not take any regulatory steps. And I know things are moving slowly. I know stuff happens behind the scenes, and eventually we'll have a period where 3 or 4 states turn on in a year, and eventually, hopefully, we'll get Schedule 3. But I guess my first one, Morgan, is that, yeah, I feel like I'm surprised that we're stuck, and I'm surprised particularly that we feel stuck given how much demand I see from the consumer side of things.
Yeah. I mean, I do agree with you that I would much rather have the regulatory issue than a demand issue. I think that's a much harder solve of having
Yeah.
a demand issue. So, and demand has been a tailwind, right? I mean, it's there. So, yeah, I can understand the surprises, the frustration and that surprise of, how many more years do we have to sustain before we do get that change? And so,
And how much how much are the businesses changing during this? Well, and I'll save part of this for later, but to tease it a little bit, like, how much are businesses getting compromised during this period where nothing is happening? So if you're footprint levered to Virginia and Pennsylvania, which there's a few MSOs that have really meaningful exposure there. Pennsylvania's a huge MSO state, and that's not for those operators. It's not killing them, but TerrAscend's got a ton of stuff there. Juicy's got a ton of stuff there. Cresco's got a ton of stuff there. And it's so I get frustrated because I feel like this isn't so much for Leaf, because we've had kind of a breakout year for us because of expanding California and entering New York. But when I look across the industry, I see a lot of businesses taking on more debt, revenue coming down, margins coming down. And I'll get to this, I'll save most of it for later, but just to finish this first point, like, I wonder what the implications are if and when reform hits. And does that affect us in the sense that the space doesn't look broadly as investable as it used to be? So do you get as hard and lasting of a move coming out of this because you've waited so long to make those changes?
Yeah. Well, I think every year that passes without it means fewer and fewer that will be here to benefit from it. I think we're seeing that this year. As mentioned before, like Gold Flower is an example, company that's gone and now is going to be, now under Stizzy, and we're seeing AYR, right, gone. I mean, it'll still come back in another form, but you get my point of, like, there's just going to be a narrowing.
Forefront gone.
Forefront. Yeah.
Cannabis selling valuable assets to keep cash going.
Right. And there's more and more and more, especially because next year we have, what is it, a 1.5 billion of debt to get refied. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the solve is for a lot of those companies where, there's only like the super established companies of a certain size can still get institutional support, but most, private lending groups don't want to refi behind a wall of 280E liability on these companies' balance sheets.
Yeah.
Because they're not in first position. They are deeply in second position. And in a lot of these companies' cases, their 280E liabilities in excess of their assets.
Yeah.
So what is the argument to take debt? And I think to your point is, every year that goes by, it makes it harder from a capital perspective. Is like, what's the return profile? Like we were talking about a company, I'll keep it nameless for now, but that just recently had paid off their debt and now just took out a new piece of paper, and looking at the credit quality versus what you could buy elsewhere without, huge senior position ahead of you, you can get better yield on that. So it's like, from a capital perspective, an opportunity cost, what's the argument? And I think that's really tough. And the challenge with political is we keep reelecting the same people that are not going to make change. And then you got to wait 4 more years. Mm-hmm. So what do you expect if you keep reelecting the same people? I mean, Virginia's a great example. Like, Youngkin was very clearly not pro-cannabis, and he was reelected. We had to wait 4 more years. So, it's like, it's tough because our industry and interest in seeing it legalized is there, but you don't get that choice on the ballot to pick, like, I'm going to vote for you, but you got to do this single issue that I want, right? It's like, you can't have that level of specificity in the vote. So that's tricky when you're trying to drive some of these state level changes, or like Florida that put that absurd, threshold, which was by design. But then again, stop voting in DeSantis. I mean, I know he's done now, but but he got reelected. So what do you expect? The guy was not going to legalize cannabis. He was going to do everything he could to stop it, including potentially something that was illegal. And we'll see if anything even happens to him. But you know what I mean? Like, so yeah. Sorry, little rant there.
No, you're good. That's just to keep things moving. My second one is super unclever as well, Morgan, which is I'm surprised that the Farm Bill loophole was closed. And I'm surprised that it was stuffed in the Appropriations Act the way that it was. I just didn't see, we've been waiting so long for an actual revision to the farm bill. And naively, like, I'm wrong about all political stuff. I just thought there'd be some sort of constructive back and forth, and it'd be something that would be a more visible process. And instead, you just wake up, one day, and a whole industry is, under the current form, like wiped out and changed forever. And especially on the beverage side, like we'll see what happens there, right? Like there's a view that beverages, probably survive. It seems like if I were to describe the consensus view today, I would have said a while ago, I thought it was beverages and low dose edibles. Now I hear back and forth in the edibles, and it seems like people are more confident on the low dose, beverage side on a national level. We'll see what happens at the low dose edible side. To me, that just is insanity. Like the difference between a drink and a pack of gummies is just how you choose to stuff them in your mouth. So to me, that's insane. I understand, the alcohol component and the lobbying behind it, but I think the reality of it is, is insanity. Either you do one or you do both of those. But yeah, I think when I just look back at this year and say what I'm surprised about, I mean, that's a huge shakeup. That is a huge shakeup, and it turns an area, especially that intoxicating space, like set aside the actual, minors and CBD and the non-intoxicating space, but just that intoxicating space was for a while the darling, right? Like we would talk to people that were in the beverage space, investing in the beverage space, operators in the beverage space, and while we're over here licking our wounds and mourning, they were, skipping around happy as possible, being like, I can't believe you guys are over here, man. We're crushing it over here. We can sell these nationwide and websites and D2C and no 280E, and bam, that's gone. And I think that's a huge shakeup that I think is going to have a meaningful impact on our industry, not just next year, but over the next, decade.
I mean, Rhythm was what, $40 a share before the announcement, and today it's like 15.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've got cash to weather that, but most don't. Yeah, I mean, I was, we had Aaron Edelheit on what, like a month before this happened, and who was involved in a lot of beverages, and he was damn well certain there was no issue. So it just goes to show how much of a surprise it was to that whole space. Like they didn't, and yeah, I did not have on my Kelshi bet that it was going to happen via, government resolution to reopen the government. I mean, that was one of the biggest shocks we've seen in this space, probably going back to when the Cole memo largely got rescinded. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just trying to think of what other single event that was so material. It's tough. I mean, we talked to a lot of these guys too, and common question was, what are you doing for self-regulatory efforts to try to encourage testing and age gating? And no one, I'd say broadly, didn't care until it was too late. And so, I mean, now we have, I think, going back to rescheduling, I think this is actually a question mark. Is this issue hurting the rescheduling process? Because now we have all these people in DC from the hemp side screaming about needing a stay or needing something, and making a lot of noise. This is a huge issue. We got to protect the farmers, blah, blah, blah. All the known hemp talking points. And there's not a peep in the cannabis side really going on relative to that noise. And so it's like, if you're DC and you're like, well, where are we? I mean, we just got more fragmented as a result. This was like a bomb that blew us apart into more pieces. And how do we bring it back together to get back into focus on how to do this? But challenge with the hemp thing is, if this doesn't, I mean, I know there's some Democrats that have come out with a new bill, and it's only a couple of them. And, this is not by far bipartisan supported work to even get a stay. But if they don't get it done by end of January, and I'll pose this question to you, but, because we work with industrial hemp farmers and we're securing all of our acreage now. If you try to secure your acreage come March, like let's say they get the stay before the end of January, like would you guys still plant this year if you had the ability to plant your hemp acreage, but you didn't know what was going to happen if there was no stay and the market was going to effectively shut down? Would you still plant?
Not unless you had like a real, CBD business and, product line and, distribution for, what would qualify under the new regime. But if your bet was that was going to be converted and, made into intoxicating products, I don't see how you could make that bet.
Right.
And if you did,
I'd say you got to pay me up front.
What's that?
I'd say if I was a farmer, I'd say you got to pay me up front for the whole crop, whether it's a success or not. You got to pay me, because I don't know otherwise if you're going to be here by the time I harvest and you're supposed to buy it from me.
Yeah, and so that was one of the biggest takeaways from the conversation with Whit a couple of weeks ago, was the need to move sooner on something because of the supply chain issue. Because if it's not resolved, like there's two things that could happen. You plant and it goes in and nothing changes, and then you have all this material out there that can't be sold, at least in a legal manner. Or you don't plant and then things do change and you have demand for more material, and then the supply chain isn't there. So like from a supply chain side of things, yeah, you're depending on the state, more, colder states, you might not be in the ground, until April, May, but you're going to be making those plans still in, February for what you're going to do that year. And so that does make me not optimistic that it's going to go one way or the other, but it does make me optimistic. I don't know, is optimistic even the word? It does make me think that we may see resolution on this in Q1, because if it drags on, yeah, what do you do if you're dealing with that uncertainty? And also, Morgan, you and I have gotten decks. We've shared decks with each other from beverage companies looking to raise capital, right? These weren't public, and so you didn't see it out there on Twitter and LinkedIn and those places. But there were a lot of beverage companies either looking to get started or looking for more money to expand. And I would imagine if you're an investor now looking at the beverage space to put more dollars in, either follow-on dollars or new dollars. I don't know. You can tell me, Morgan, because you're the professional investor now in the group. How would you look at a situation like that? Is there a way you could put money in at this point without this being resolved?
Not a chance.
Yeah.
There's not a chance, because the other thing that you have to keep in mind is all these beverage companies that made beverages and distributed them out to companies like Total Wine or Circle K or whatever, those retailers have the right to put all of that back to you. So not only are you still producing, but you might get a whole bunch of inventory back that you got to deal with. You got to pay for. You sold it, you collected money, and now they're saying, nope, you're going to take it back, so you got to give us our money back. So now you're getting all these products back. And because we're already starting to hear about stores that are saying, we're going to clear them off the shelves. We're done. Either maybe they'll sell it through, but there's going to be other retailers that are going to put it back. And that's going to, most of these companies, as you're mentioning, are still in venture mode. They're still in cash consumption mode. Mm-hmm. They don't have balance sheets to deal with that. And that will kill a lot of companies very quickly. And so I mentioned like Rhythm, at least, I mean, they've got a balance sheet. They can deal with this. I mean, the amount of product they produce relative to the amount of cash on their balance sheet, not a problem. And so they've got the ability to stay and see how this is going to net out. And they have other means of generating revenue via their brand share deal they did with GTI. Most are not in that position. So, and I do think ultimately, like if I put my alcohol hat on, you kill the supply side, you flush out the market, so there's no supply, and then the market goes, pretty quiet, and it's real easy for them to say, this is how the regulations are going to look, and we're going to bring it back on, and all of a sudden they're the ones in the position to capture all of that market. Mm-hmm. They'll bring the supply side back. They'll already have all the distribution. They'll have the points of sale. And so I see this, I think beverage is by far or it may be over in the short term, but it is going to be a category and it'll come back. It's just going to come back in a very different form. So,
And I like where this conversation is going, and it's kind of moving us into the moving forward section of the agenda. Talking about what we expect from 2026 and beyond. And I think a lot of this is going to be shaped in part by the direction the hemp industry goes. And it appears that a good part of that it's intoxicating piece is going away in one form or the other. Beverages may survive, low dose gummies survive, but um, getting the vape pens, the THCA flower, I think a portion of that goes away, right, Morgan? I mean, theoretically, all of it goes away, but I think enforcement's going to be a huge issue here. And I think if you're a real big visible player, you rely on credit card systems, right? Because they could just, we could turn those off quickly, and that would make a big difference. But I think that in a lot of cases, for the smaller ones, it's kind of like in California when you went from medical to adult use and a whole new framework. A lot of the medical continued just kind of low key, almost trap style at that point. And I think that probably happens, with a portion of this intoxicating, industry. I don't think I think that there's no way it goes away overnight. I think that you see big players drop out. I think you see smaller players get quieter, and I think the industry shrinks. But as it relates to the cannabis investor that's listening to this today and owns, some basket of cannabis stocks, I think an important conversation is how does this shape the legal industry moving forward? And I'm curious, like, do you think we see a meaningful increase or, TAM expansion? Any particular states you're looking at that could benefit from this? Because at a high level, Morgan, I see the states where there's a lot of intoxicating hemp don't have a natural conversion into an adult use program, and the medical programs sometimes don't exist, or they could be more stringent. So I don't know that that's necessarily an easy conversion, but I do have a couple of states circled, and I'll go second here. I'll let you go. That I think could benefit more than others. So I think it's going to be a bit selective in terms of how this intoxicating hemp converts potentially into the legal cannabis market.
yeah. Well, enforcement has been a problem for the entire thesis of legal cannabis, right? It's been a problem from day one. Intoxicating hemp is going to be no different. The challenge for the intoxicating hemp side is, it's just if you're culling supply and you're culling capital, it'll be fertile for those that can deal with it, but you're also going to have a lot of uncertainty around getting shut down or not. Who knows? But I mean, like D2C, like I'm here in California, intoxicating hemp products should not be available. I can tell you right now, I can go on and buy it and it'll show up by USPS or FedEx or whatever. There's no way to police that. And that's been a huge problem in Arizona too. We talked to Arizona operators, which is a super low price market, but they have all this D2C intoxicating hemp because it's banned there too. It's still flowing in. So there's no way to enforce that side of things. And it's just a bigger question of how do you enforce it overall. I think states that will benefit are states like, coming back to Ohio, that does have a legal program. Mm-hmm. They had this out of control hemp side of things that was not regulated. And now they're saying, look, you're just going to have to sell through the legal channels, meaning through their retail network. I think the retail side of our industry does have a lot of staying power for that reason, because I think the states, like, they feel a lot of comfort in knowing, like, we have X amount of retail licenses and we have good oversight on that. And so I think from that model, logically, so this is where at the state level it makes sense, is like conforming into one set of regulations, one set of testing. You have age gating, and that covers all of these different products. I'm not a fan of banning. I think that doesn't do anybody any benefit. So, but at least put it into a regulated system. And I just, for the life of me, would prefer not having to have two sets of regulatory bodies, two sets of regulations for what you're achieving as an intoxicating substance derived, from cannabis, whether you call it intoxicating hemp or not. I mean, it's exhibiting psychoactive benefits. So regulating it in a way that captures that, makes sense. So seeing a state like Ohio where those state legal stores were suffering from that competition should stand to benefit from it.
And what's your read on Florida? That's the other one. I agree with you on Ohio. I think it can move the needle there. What's your view on Florida? Because that's the other one I had circled where you could see some of that intoxicating hemp convert, in that case, to the medical market. But that's a medical market that's loose and looks like it continues to get looser and easier for patients to access. Then, oh, by the way, by the time this loophole closes, uh, we'll have another crack at adult use. We'll see if that happens. But, another thing to consider when you're looking at the Florida situation.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think Curaleaf's announcement today that closing their store.
Yeah.
We're done with it. And I could see others that say we're done with it. We'll see what Circle K does in Florida, if they are quick to adopt that as well, or if they let the clock run and see what might happen. But yeah, I think, where it's adult use legal, I think those have a higher shot of a larger conversion. I mean, because even Florida's medical, I haven't looked at the numbers in a while, but the penetration rate of medical card holders relative to the population is still pretty low, right? Like it could still double from here. If it were really like a truly loose medical market, they could see a lot more card holders, which would be great for the state. Or you just friggin' legalize it, which I know they like to do. But yeah, so I mean, it should help. I think it should help. It's just how quickly they remove products from the shelves, and so that people don't have that choice anymore. So
Yeah.
yeah,
The other avenue that's caught my eye, aside from the intoxicating piece, is when we talk about things that'll survive. We're mentioning beverages could survive, maybe some sort of a low dose edible survives, but it looks like Trump is leaning into CBD, right? And especially this notion of CBD in seniors with that thing he posted on, True Social. What was that? Feels like 2 months or so ago now.
yeah,
And they talk about including CBD as a reimbursable, through Medicare. And so I wonder if that's going to create some opportunity. And my early read on that is it's going to be a selective opportunity because they're going to be looking for something that has more of a pharmacological feel to it, right? And so I think it's going to take, if you, I feel like I'm talking about Leaf a lot here, guys, but this is just my life. I don't mean to make the show a Leaf commercial. I'm actually consciously trying not to make it a Leaf commercial, but it is my life. And I look at like what we're doing at Leaf. We have a 100-acre hemp permit here in California, which is currently dormant while we wait for clarity. And then we have the extraction lab in Mendocino County, which is state of the art and one of the largest, I guess in the world. It's one of the largest in the state. So that'll make it one of the largest in the world as well. And at the lab, if you can do something like GMP certification, and you had a clean source of cannabis like we do at Salisbury Canyon Ranch, where you could grow hemp. So you have clean hemp that's being grown and then being produced into CBD in like a GMP certified facility. And then that ultimately ends up in a pharmacy distribution system or a doctor's office or a hospital type distribution system. It's not the sexy fun part that we talk about with proper cannabis in the state legal system, but it does look like from a regulatory perspective that there's going to be potentially some higher demand for CBD and even maybe a push for CBD as an alternative for seniors.
yeah. I'll be very curious how that evolves, because if you think about it from the doctor's perspective, because in order for it to be Medicare reimbursable, it has to, as you were just outlining, has to achieve certain standards. But who's going to set those standards?
Mm-hmm.
It makes me think of the FDA.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
And what are they going to be doing if it's a banned substance? Why are they going to do this? And then in what form are they going to approve it? Is it only going to be in topical or pill form, or, you know what I mean, for them to get the doctors on board with saying like, it's not a prescription, but saying like, if you use this, try this out and it's reimbursable, for them to get the stamp of approval on it, they're going to want something familiar to them to do it. So it's like a big sales initiative of educating doctors and what products and what companies, what brands can support that. I mean, you think about the pharma industry. I mean, they have a massive field of sales agents constantly out there pushing their products. How do we get into that ecosystem to really get that adoption up? So that's why I'll be very curious to see how efficient that is, or if it's going to be a very small amount of adoption that'll take a long time to become more significant. I don't know. or if, friggin' J&J or Procter and Gamble or somebody comes in and buys up a CBD company and, puts their stamp on it, maybe that'll accelerate things a lot faster, because then they're, once it's kind of like alcohol, same idea. They have all the distribution, they have all the points of sale, and they just get behind it and say, this is what it's going to look like. But will they touch it if they're not going to touch a banned substance, but maybe a rescheduled substance? I don't know. Cause you still have the challenge of interstate and how that, gets resolved. So yeah. And I know, cause it's just tough. Cause like CBD, I know we always talk about it as something that doesn't get you high, but there is this percentage of population that it still makes people feel intoxicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we carried CBD when I had the dispensary, and my impression of CBD is that, and this is from firsthand experience of putting it on the menu, and I'm biased because I put it on a menu of people that were buying cannabis, and so if a cannabis person that's used to being intoxicated by what they buys the CBD, there's a natural bit of a letdown that you might feel there. So my experience of selling CBD was a ton of people tried it, and 5 years ago, maybe there was a little bit more hype around CBD. Seems to kind of come and go in waves, but not many people came back for it. And that's not to say CBD doesn't have uses or isn't, a valid thing that helps a bunch of conditions. I just found the crossover from the dispensary buyer was low. And so I think CBD too will be driven by like the success that people have with it. And so like, do we put the right, good products that actually work and high quality CBD in their hands? And then do we find the right use cases for it? Because I think CBD can be helpful, but I knew a lot of people that tried it for, quote, anxiety, and it just wasn't really a needle mover for them. Whereas I've seen other people, I've mentioned on the show, my niece's special needs, and she has epilepsy. And in that community for kids, like it'll just, turn off the seizures, or, my dad with a chronic pain problem, CBD was slightly helpful for him, but he had more luck with CBG and even, things like CBC, some of the other minors out there. And so I think if we can create a framework that makes sense, that's important. But I think also finding the right qualifying conditions and having the consumer actually lead the charge, because the doctor can suggest you try it once, but then you actually try the tincture. And if it helps you, then it's going to create massive demand. But if people aren't feeling the benefit, then, you're not going to, shove it down their throat.
It's very hard to tell people the effect you're going to have is the absence of something else.
I know.
So, and this is, whenever I hear this, it always makes me think of our now late sweet girl, our dog that we had to say goodbye to this year. I guess that should have been one of my big surprises this year, but that inevitably happens. But she was a huge beneficiary of CBD. And the great thing is about pets is like, there's no placebo effect for a pet.
Yeah, right.
They don't, like, she thought she was just eating a cookie, but man, did that help. And it was such a huge part of our, for years with her. We had them, Treatables were the brand we used to get. And she had them for probably like 10 years, but she was a super anxious dog, separation anxiety, just all kinds of stuff. And they really did help take that, the absence away, or of the anxiety. It really was a big benefit. And I know there's actually been stuff that's thankfully coming up about the benefits of CBD for pets, because I just don't think people realize. And it's such a nice option versus, so many of the pharmaceutical products, that just make them so logy and dopey and, not themselves. But
yeah,
CBD does keep them themselves. They just don't have that unfortunate crazy edge that's in their breed.
Yeah, we were baking CBD dog cookies for a while when I had the dispensary, and people loved them. They said, the separation anxiety, less barking sometimes when dogs are in pain. And just to kind of wrap up the CBD thing, I do see definitely use cases for it. So I don't want to be a bear. I'm just saying that on the people that come from the intoxicating side, then they go to the CBD side. I found that there's less stickiness to that. Versus you take someone like my girlfriend's grandmother is 88 years old, and she has really bad arthritis in her knees and hips and pretty much all of her joints at this point. And she's been taking CBD capsules twice a day, and hasn't turned it off, but it certainly has made her made her more comfortable. So maybe that's the best, corollary or use case, because she's a senior. She would be, on Medicare. She's somebody who's never used cannabis in her life, and now she's finding relief from something that she probably doesn't know or even care has cannabis in it. So yeah, that's kind of I guess, yeah, as I'm talking through the CBD side, like it's a bummer in some ways for the good actors to see some of that business close down, but if we can refresh it in a safer manner and then get things like CBD or maybe even other minors in more seniors' hands, I think that's when I look for the greater good of society angle, that seems like a potentially really one positive outcome out of a difficult situation.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, CBD is not going away. I mean, it just, to the point of the way it was is not the way it will be. But I think that's the same for legal cannabis. The way it was is not the way it's going to be when you think over a longer period of time. It's just not. We're evolving. We're still an emerging market, like, and it's always tumultuous out of that. So, yeah.
Well, why don't we wrap things up, Morgan? We're going to do our usual thing where we have too much of an agenda and we have to skip some sections. But there's plenty of good stuff we can come back to and work through either later this month or even as we get into next year. I think there's good conversations around if Schedule 3 happens, what changes with it. So maybe we can save that section and cover that over the next few weeks. But I like something that you added to the agenda, which is what still excites us about working in this industry. And I'll since you added it here, why don't you lead us off on this one?
So yes, I did add this in here because it is a question of what gets us up and gets us, fighting the good fight every day. And as we look forward, what does. I'm going to say it, and it's going to be a little bit hard, but it's coming from a good place. What excites me is consolidation happening. As we were talking about earlier, like Stizzy with Gold Flora picking up those assets. We just need more consolidation because we need things to stabilize. And so the fact that companies are now finally saying, like, look, I got over my skis, raised way too much money. My investors are going to take an L to a degree, but I'm going to do this because this is in the best interest versus losing it all, is finally happening. And I think that's exciting from this next phase, like, because we don't have federal bankruptcy. So it just has really slowed down the cycle of clearing out a lot of assets. People have hung on for so long. So now finally seeing more activity. It's quiet, right? Because these are a lot of private companies that are doing things, and they're doing things in receivership or whatever it might be, but it's happening. And so the more this can happen, the more stabilized I think we get to, and that's positive. And that's something that excites me because transactions are good. Transactions are good for a lot of different things. Maybe you had a small business, you had grand aspirations, it didn't work out, but if you have something good and someone wants it, versus like for the last couple of years, people are like, no, I'm not interested. But now people are picking up the phone and saying, let's talk about it, and putting offers out there. That's good because we've had capital trapped within our industry because there hasn't been a lot of money coming in, but it's been trapped within the industry. So unlocking that is a positive. Just having more tools functioning again has been something that's been lacking. So that's positive. Second, from a policy side, I think something is going to change next year. And I'm saying it with only the intention of wanting it so badly, but I really do think 2026 being a midterm year for things that we've talked about over the summer when rescheduling first popped up, I really think 2026 we're going to see something happen at the federal level around legal cannabis. Maybe it's the SCOTUS that, the Supreme Court, they're having their closed door session on Friday. Maybe that is a Supreme Court hearing for intrastate commerce next year. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's rescheduling. Maybe it's both. But I think we're at that point, and it has to happen. So I really want it to happen, but I really think the odds are in our favor for something to happen next year. So change is coming.
Yeah, potentially a couple of things, right? Like, I mean, the way that this change to the hemp market is rolled out and the time frame under which it happens, and combine that with potentially Schedule 3, and is there more than Schedule 3? Is there a memo? Is there chatter about descheduling? Yeah, it's hard. We have so much PTSD around it, but it feels like we're getting to the end of the road one way or the other. Like, if Schedule 3 doesn't happen before midterms, what does that mean?
There'll be 4 or 5 companies or 10 companies left.
But what does that mean to the state of reform? Why does it happen? Like, we have we have a president that, signaled he was into it. And okay, it wasn't your hugest priority. We're used to not being the hugest priority, but if you don't get it in the first half of the term, and I even see that, like, you were talking off camera beforehand, and I was saying, yeah, it was a disappointment because it felt like, the Tyson tweets are one thing, but when you get the political advisors and those people talking about Schedule 3, I got sucked into that a little bit. I'm bad with time frames, but that feels like that was what, August, September, somewhere around there. Um, and at that point, we were talking about it on the show, and I was like, and you're like, yeah, you were, correctly saying maybe, well, so far correctly, maybe that gets held, and they're just, kind of taking everyone's temperature, but they actually keep it for the political value, which would be to save it till midterms. And in my head, I'm like, ah, man, that would suck. But that makes a lot of sense. Like, why do it now if you could save it, and use it as something to get momentum going into the midterms? And so, yeah, I think that's now, the most likely thing. Like, there's some people still talking about potentially it happens this year. God bless. Hope it does. Sure doesn't look like it will. I hear people talking about the first quarter. Again, guys, I have no idea. Maybe it does. God bless. But before the midterms, I think is kind of the base case realistic expectation. And we're talking off camera too, Morgan, and share part of it, which is it feels critical, right? Like, there's a lot of businesses struggling, and every year, certain businesses are just going down in value more and more because this is catching up with them more and more because they can't keep up with the 280E and all the restrictions around them. And so, yeah, I feel like every year we come into, I feel like, man, this is a big year, but next year does feel like a big year. And yeah, I tend to agree with you. We're going to see some changes, but maybe changes on two sides, which, one of the things, Morgan, when I was an analyst at Water Tower Research, I would have conversations with investors. And I remember talking to a small cap growth manager in New York, someone I knew from my hedge fund days. And this was in June of, I guess, what was that? Last year? Was Florida the ballot last year? Yeah, June of last year. And he reached out to me. I didn't even reach out to him. And he's like, "Hey, Jesse, we used to talk back in the day, and we're getting some interest, in these small cap growth type funds." And this guy had retired at the time, but he had a family office he was running. But he's like, "I know 4 or 5 small cap managers that if Schedule 3 hits and if Florida hits, we're looking to put meaningful capital work in the space." And he asked me to kind of help get him up to speed on what was going on in the industry. And I we got stopped because we didn't get the reform angle and we didn't get the new states angle. But I feel like, we have the potential to get that momentum back. Like, there is, because we suffer, Abner used to talk about the stair step growth pattern, that you have flat periods and you go up a stair and you have real growth. And eventually we're going to hit one of those periods. And, sometimes I let myself, put on that bullish hat that, is there a world next year where, some of that hemp tam converts, we get Schedule 3, and then Florida, who knows, but your Pennsylvanias, your Virginias, could that ignite a little bit of growth? And yeah, I think that's definitely possible that happens next year. And going back to that small cap growth manager, the thing that he said to me was, "Jesse, for now, I can't play the game if I don't know the rules." And I was like, that makes sense. Some people are, were making bets on the rules, right? Like, people were putting money to work ahead of Schedule 3, or going back to, what was that, November 23 or 22, Morgan, plug your ears, when we were talking about safe banking. People were putting the money to work ahead of that, and we see those huge spikes. But now we're at that, show me state. And, just talking this through, if we can get some of those rules in place, maybe that allows more of the adults, more of the institutions, the bigger capital to come into the room, because then they at least know the game they're playing. Whereas right now, I don't think it's an unfair perspective to look at the industry and be like, oh my gosh, if I don't have an edge in predicting the rules, it's kind of hard to know how to act because I don't know how the game's actually going to be played.
Right. It's been reinforced this year. I mean, because people that did pour money into intoxicating hemp, probably most of it's gone.
Yeah.
So they've been reinforced of that position of wait until you actually know the rules. I mean, Florida is another great example. People were front running the ballot because they were so confident it was going to pass, which was consensus, and it was damn close, but it still didn't pass. As a result, Florida's overcapitalized with way too much capacity, and prices have come down massively. So to your point is like, so capital is becoming more and more skittish until it's like, yeah, wants to know. And I understand that. I mean, it's one thing that's like crazy to me is in a lot of these states where they're still adding capacity. You know, Arizona is a great example. People are still trying to add capacity. California is different with what you guys are doing because it's California, it's outdoor, it's a different model. But the fact that people are still putting tens of millions of dollars into indoor in these different states, to me is just, you know, when are we going to learn? But it's getting harder and harder, but they still are.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're also a bit different in that the material that we grow goes straight through our extraction process, and so we're not putting more flower out of the market ourselves. Instead, we're just switching the supply chain so that we're, feeding ourselves. Whereas I don't think we would have lit up a grow like this just to push more flower to the California market if we didn't have a, extraction business that was designed for it.
Yeah. Perfect example in Massachusetts, there's a $50 million grow on the market, and I don't think it got more than $2 million a bid for it.
Yeah, right. Yep.
So what excites you? Or did you already cover that? I don't think
No, I'll just cover it quickly. Yeah, I kind of feel like in a lot of ways, Morgan, I'm more passionate than ever. We came here through different ways, right? Where what was it, 2013, 2014, you and Emily, got involved in this industry, certainly, more than a decade ago. And for me, it wasn't until, 2016 when I had the aha moment and I decided to stop what I was doing on the investing side, started the store in, 2017, got into the investing side of things in 2020, kind of quietly. And then it wasn't really until, 22, 23, I think you and I probably met around, 23 or so was when I think I started my X account. And then I started, doing, more of the spaces, more of the podcasts, got the job with Water Tower Research, increased my visibility more. And so we've had, different paths to getting here. But, it's been an absolute battle, man. Like, I think everybody understands this, but like, if you're an investor out there and you're bummed and depressed about your portfolio, just understand that, like, from what I see across the industry, like, everyone's in the trenches, just working hard as ever and as passionately as ever, trying to make the most of, what's so far been a difficult situation. And despite how hard it's been, like, we're coming up on 5 years, man, since the MSO has peaked on February 10th, 2021 at $55 a share. Here we are 5 years later, it's got some sort of a three handle on it. What is it, 375 or something like that? So we're down, 90% from the peak, 5-year bear market, all the challenges that we talk about. But what I get excited about, Morgan, is what we talked about a little bit earlier, which is this demand side of the equation. Like, there's no sign that people don't love these products. And still, despite the fucked up policy part of it, I think there still is such tremendous potential in this industry because of the crazy benefits the plant has. It's a better recreational substance. Alcohol is being drank less than ever, thankfully, and weed's being used as much or more than ever, probably more than ever. We just don't capture all the data because it comes from the black market and the hemp market plus the legal market. But weed continues to grow while the things that are harmful for you, like alcohol, come down. I'm super excited about the potential, on the medical side for people, people like my dad who went from taking 1,000 milligrams of OxyContin a day. Let me say that, 1,000 milligrams. That's over 30 milligram pills of OxyContin a day for a pain problem. People like that can get completely off of those substances and get their life back through things like cannabis. Even the CBD for seniors is kind of a boring part, but when I see my girlfriend's 88-year-old grandma feeling better from CBD, like, to me, man, that's what it's all about. Like, do I want to make money here? Do I have 2 kids going to college in the near future? Yes. Does that stress me out every day? Yes. Looking out longer term, like I hope things happen near term that make this, eventually something, for guys like you, Morgan, where you get, paid a little bit and we can make a good wage and get through this. But I'm still passionate as ever because I think that more and more you just see the value of the plant, and the plant is so resilient that it's been here, thousands of years of people trying to hold it down. I'm reading Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind About Psychedelics, and you see the same thing in that space. We're trying to hold it down. We're trying to hold it down. We're trying to hold it down, but it just keeps bubbling up. And I feel the same way with cannabis. Like, despite these insane taxes in California, when I go to the store and buy $100 of cannabis, that's $135 out the door. Plus, you've got your 280E taxes. Plus, you have all your supply chain taxes along the way. We've set up a system designed to fail, and we haven't quite failed. We're still scrapping. We're still getting through it. We've got a lot of scars. We've got a lot of battle wounds. We lost some friends along the way, but we're still powering through it. And I think that's because the plant is so awesome. If cannabis were not so awesome, we would have stymied it, right? It would have gone away. But when you take it away from people, it just goes to the underground. You take it away from people, it just goes through the hemp channels because people want the end product. And so I guess, some days I don't always wake up feeling so great. Some days I'm a little bit more discouraged than others. Some days this gets exhausting. But overall, man, I couldn't think of like a better industry to be in terms of the potential it has, both in terms of the financial potential, if we get the rules set up in a fair manner, but also this real guiding light, which is like, how many people can we help? Like, I was talking to, Micah in a 2.5 hour car ride, post chicken sandwich. And we're talking about like, what would we do if we were in the cannabis industry? And, both of our answers came to different versions of something else that would, leave a lasting legacy, not a lasting legacy from an ego perspective. Like, I want to say Jesse did it, but, Micah has a daughter. I have a daughter and a son. Kids are around the same age. And we think about like, when you get to be a little bit older, we're both about 50 years old. You want to think like, how do I leave this a better place? Like, how do I make this something that's better for my kids? And I think psychedelics can for sure do that. I think psychedelics have, crazy interesting potential, different podcasts, different investments. But cannabis, I put in that same bucket. Like, I really, really believe it can make the world a better place. I've seen it in my own family. My niece with epilepsy, my dad with the chronic pain problem. I personally have delivered cannabis to thousands of patients, and not just once, but over and over again. And I didn't see those people falling apart. I saw them getting off of pills. I saw them drinking less alcohol. I saw them being super nice people. And so all of that, just makes me excited. And I feel like what you talked about, maybe we can get, closer to an inflection point. And is that a V-shaped inflection point where things, quadruple in value overnight? I don't think that's necessarily the case anymore, but I think we're steps closer to putting in a proper foundation where we can build lasting businesses. And so I'm super excited about that. On a personal level, I'm super excited about being a part of Leaf. I love the guys, Micah, Kevin, Emily, the whole senior leadership team that I work with. I feel like my job there is a great role for me, where it's a blend of telling the story and doing some business development stuff. And then you put on top of that I get to talk about and work, in the cannabis every day and business every day. And somehow, Morgan, again, I think this goes back to like the whole magic of the plant, that somehow after all these beatings and, making so little money for so many years, and so many hardships and so much uncertainty. Like, man, just to be transparent, like late last year, when I was working at Water Tower Research, it was a success-based model where, like, if you can find clients that want coverage, awesome, you can make a bunch of money. If you're in a period where nobody wants to pay for coverage because nobody's reading the research, it gets really hard. And I've had some of these moments where I was like thinking late last year, do I find something else to do in the cannabis industry? Or I was thinking about switching and covering, a Water Tower. I had a great relationship. And they're like, why don't we give you another sector in addition to cannabis? Why don't you cover natural products? Why don't you cover beverages and alcohol or something like that, which could have been like a career pivot to another space. But I decided to, stick it through, found the opportunity with Leaf that is, wound up great. And so, it's gotten to be a little bit of a, meandering explanation, man. But I guess I just kind of leave it that I'm super excited to be here. And I think there's a great opportunity ahead. And I like that you went first on this, and we're talking about some of the opportunities around clarity, because it's either going to go away, Morgan, or it's not going to be this hard forever, right? Like, it's not going to continue just like it is. And my hunch is that it does turn. My hunch is that it doesn't get to be awesome instantly, but my hunch is that we have better days ahead. And if we can have a good time like this, Morgan, after this kind of beating we've taken, think of how great this will be if we just have some good years ahead of us.
Makes me think of the dot-com bust.
Yes.
After the dot-com bust, tech was shit for years. And then it started getting better and better and better. And now look at it today. Holy shit. So, I think there's that kind of reality of like there was a massive amount of wipeout that happened there and it took time, but the good ones made it through. New entrants came in, new and greater and so like I'm not saying that we're gonna have $1 trillion plus companies in our sector, but no one knows. Who knows what the future is going to be? But I do believe, to your point, I think there's some relationship like that. I don't think we're going to go the way of the airlines or the autos, where there's only two companies or four companies or whatever, depending which one you're talking about. I just think, yeah, there's more correlation to alcohol and tobacco in those instances. It's a blend of all these different things. But part of the learning is understanding what humans do and what they've done in the past and how they're likely to continue to behave. And but the overarching theme is that there's a benefit to society and people are speaking, and eventually that will filter through. But the demand side is what we do have to hang our hat on, because that's it's not changing.
Yeah.
It's only going to get better, I think. To your point, I agree. More form factors, more demographic adoption. It's in our favor.
Anything else on your mind, Bork? Anything else on the agenda you want to hit? Anything else you're excited about? Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap things up here?
No, I should say the final thing I'm excited for is a haircut, which I'm about to go do. As you can tell, my hair is a little unruly at the moment, so I'm going to go get that done. But yeah, so is this it for us for 26 or 25, or are we maybe going to squeeze one more in?
I don't know. Why don't we play it by year? We usually do it every 2 weeks. Today is Thursday, December 11th, so they'll put us on Christmas. I'm not guessing we won't do a Christmas show.
Right.
So maybe if we get some exciting news, why don't we leave it as if we get some exciting news? We'll hop back on, but maybe absent that, we'll take that week of the 25th off, which would be 2 weeks from now off, and maybe hit it again first week of next year, as we're talking through schedules live on the air. But maybe that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, and I hope that we're back on before the end of the year.
I do too, Ben. And if we aren't back on, this has been a good year for the show. This is the year we switched to video, Morgan, right? Like I'm totally lost on time frames, but that feels like that was feels like 6 months ago, maybe.
Yeah, that was one of our goals.
Yeah,
we set out at the start of the year was switching to video. We did it. And
I know.
viewership is up, so thanks to everybody. I'm excited about everyone that tunes in. I mean, our YouTube is up to like 120 or something, which is awesome. Thanks for our subscribers on YouTube. Yeah, no, it's great. This was a good year, and I think the cadence of every 2 weeks was good. I think having content for everybody instead of trying to do it every week, where there wasn't always something to talk about every week. So this, I think, was a good move. A lot of good moves that we made this year with the higher exchanges.
Yeah, I've loved going to video. That was one of those things that's like, oh man, that looks so hard. Oh man, having a YouTube channel looks so hard. Oh man, going live, on X and LinkedIn looks so hard. But when you get the right tech in place, and yes, we stumbled a couple of times, but I think we got through it pretty quickly. So yeah, I'll just wrap it up with a bit of gratitude. Thanks to everybody that's been listening. As Morgan has said, listenership has been growing this year, while the cannabis, I think the interest has been shrinking. So that's been great. Thanks to all the guests. Like, we wouldn't have a show if the guests didn't want to come on. So thanks to all the people that are regulars. Thanks to people that came on for the first time this year. I think we had a bunch of great, first time conversations, and some of the OGs that keep coming back. Your Scotts, your Sammys, your Nicks, and whoever else I'm forgetting. Thanks to all the regulars, your Hirsches. Saw him in Vegas. What's up, Hirsch? Great guy. Yeah, thanks to all those people, and yeah, thanks to everyone that keeps tuning in. We continue to do good numbers on the socials. People listen to the podcast, and yeah, YouTube. To be honest, I thought YouTube would get to be a bigger part than it has been. But if you guys want to listen to YouTube, great. If you don't, it doesn't really hurt my feelings that much. We don't make any money off of it, but the biggest slug of our listens continues to be, on the socials, which probably just tells you a little bit about which way the world is going.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all right, my friend, let's wrap it up here. Good to chat, and we'll see how things shake out. If something happens, we'll talk to you guys before the end of the year. If not, hope everyone has a happy holiday season, a great new year, and we'll see you the first week of January.
Go Bills.
Go Vikings, I guess. The views of this podcast are provided for informational purposes only. Nothing we said should be considered research nor recommendation. All investing involves risk, including the loss of principal.